Call our meeting to order. First item we have is request for bill introduction. Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me 1 second. Got to get us up on Zoom. Oh, okay, we're ready. Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a bill introduction, and the RS number is 21 RS 1835.
Okay, and this is, has to do with storage. Okay. Have a motion, have a second. Senator Kirshen seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item we have is we're going to open a hearing on House Bill 2101, extending transfers from the Expanded Lottery Act Revenue Fund to the university's engineering initiatives. And we will start out with the reviser's overview, and we'll have David Weiss. David, welcome committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. House Bill 2101 would extend the current transfer of the first $10.5 million credited to the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund, or ELARF, from ELARF to the Can-Grow Engineering Fund of KU, the Can-Grow Engineering Fund of K-State, with each such university fund receiving equal amounts of $3.5 million in each fiscal year. And this extension in the bill would be for fiscal years 2023 through 2032, so a 10-year extension. The transfer first occurred in fiscal year 2013 and is currently scheduled to end with the transfer in fiscal year 2022. The bill also amends the goal of the University Engineering Initiative Act to continue to generate the same number of engineering graduates per year as is currently set for 2021. It's 1,365 graduates to meet the needs of the engineering workforce for as long as the University Engineering Initiative Act is financed with annual transfers from ELARF. The bill becomes effective upon publication in statute book, July 1, 2021. The House Appropriations Committee worked the bill and did place an amendment on the bill. They brought in KSA 76-7-139, that new subsection D. You can see this on page 3 of the bill. It's the new ITAL beginning on page 3, line 3. This will require that on or before January 10th, 2022, or the first day of the session next year, and annually thereafter, the universities, the Board of Regents, and the Secretary of Commerce shall report to both this committee and to the Appropriations Committee in the House on how many engineering graduates remain in the state over the previous 3 years. And such report shall also provide detail concerning all efforts to increase retention of graduates and opportunities for graduates in the state, and shall include information regarding the number of engineering graduates from each institution that were initially ruled as in-state or out-of-state students. So it's just issuing a reporting requirement to Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations with that information. The House did pass the bill 112-12 on February 25th, 2021, and I can stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
David, questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to proponents. I'd like for the proponents to not read their testimony, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, you know, maybe 5 minutes or so. So with that being said, we'll start out with proponents, and we'll start out with Tom Roberts, Kansas Society of Professional Engineers. Tom, welcome committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to express my support for the support of House Bill 2101. I'm Tom Roberts. I'm the past president of both the Kansas Society of Professional Engineers and the National Society of Professional Engineers, and I'm honored to represent the Kansas Society of Professional Engineers today. A little bit about background about our society. We represent the licensed professional engineers across the state of Kansas. We've got a long-standing history of a number of years of representation of that professional group. We're proud to support 2101. She extends the Engineering University Initiative Act. It was created in 2011, as was just commented, and I think you understand the intent of the program. I think it's important to point out, though, again, even though it was just stated, that these funds come from the ELARF funds, and it's a little different funding source. That, of course, was negotiated a number of years ago and seemed to be the best way to fund the programs, and I think it continues to be a good way to support the programs. I think it's also important to point out that each university was tasked to increase the number of engineering graduates to a specific target by the 10th year. I think it's also important to point out that universities were also tasked with fundraising to equal matching funds that the state was putting together. So it was a partnership, if you will, in terms of the development of the program. All three engineering programs surpassed their numbers. However, as I continue to work with the National Society and the State Society, my colleagues tell me, and I know firsthand with some discussions I've had, that we do not have enough engineers yet in the state. The employers have demands for these engineers, and they keep looking for ways to grow and to expand. However, we've got to have enough engineers to satisfy private sector needs, but we also have to meet the growing need for engineers in the government sector, and I think that's important. To that end, we're united as a profession, I think, to many stakeholders to extend UEIA through 2032. I think it's also important to point out that there's a high degree of accountability. During my employment, I watched firsthand the number collection and how those numbers were tracked, and that continues to be an important way to track the numbers, and it's a combined effort between the Board of Regents and the Department of Commerce and each of the universities, and that's important. We thank the Legislature for creating the UEIA, but we also thank the Board of Regents and their partnership with the Department of Commerce for their oversight. Kansas State University, Wichita State University, and the University of Kansas are committed to improving workforce development. We want to see that happen. I'll be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I think we'll hold questions to the end, so some of the questions may get answered as we have testimony.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll have Eric Stafford, Kansas Chamber. Welcome, committee, Eric. Oh, okay. We'll skip over him then. If he's next door, maybe he'll have time to pop in. Okay, let's move on to John Jinks with Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Is John here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, committee,
Fantastic.
John.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for allowing the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce to testify in favor of HB 2101. Again, my name is John Jenks, Director of Public Policy at the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber and our nearly 2,000 members supports bolstering STEM educational opportunities and understands how important these educational initiatives are for talent attraction and retention. Quality workforce development programs such as this are a significant driver in economic development, and by extending the University Engineering Initiative, the Legislature can signal to the business community that not only in Kansas, but across the country, that the state is open for business. Extending this act will not only continue to increase the number of engineering degrees awarded at Kansas universities, but also increase the pipeline of engineers for the workforce. Despite the downturn that we experienced in 2020 from the coronavirus and the associated closures from that, growing the number of qualified workers is going to be vital in the coming years. And as Kansas businesses look to replace the jobs being vacated by retirements for baby boomers, growing the pipeline of qualified workers, especially in high demand fields such as engineering, will be even more important. Again, thanks for allowing the KC Chamber to testify in favor of HB 2101 today, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, John. Next, we'll have Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber. Welcome, committee, Eric.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, committee members, good morning. sitting next door dealing with unemployment insurance, so I apologize. Good morning. Hope you all are doing well. Appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 2101, extending the University Engineering Initiative. We do have numerous engineering firms of all sizes across the state as members of ours, and this is something that they've kept on our radar over the last few years. That's been working well, state program that's been working well. Workforce needs continue to be top concern for their industry. We have an initiative that has exceeded its goals over the years, and that should be commended and recognized from the university and engineering industry's perspective. So ultimately, we would just hope that you would support this program. It's been valuable for our membership. They've continued to sing its praises over time with us. So happy to answer any questions you have at the appropriate time, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we'll have Jason Watkins, Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, committee, Jason. Your mic.
Jason Watkins, Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and I'll be brief. I don't often get to talk to the Ways and Means Committee, but in Tax Committee, Commerce Committee, I often talk about the importance of the advanced manufacturing corridor that we have in South Central Kansas. The significant middle class that's created, the significant contributions that industry or cluster of industries makes to the state general fund. And these are primary jobs, by the way. When you're making airplanes, medical devices, those are getting exported outside of the state, bringing revenue back into the state, which is immensely beneficial to the economy. It's much better than just turning money over in your local economy. So in order, though, to manufacture these types of things, we need engineers. We need a lot of engineers, and we need good engineers. And that's why this legislation is important. I do want to share quickly just one experience that we had a couple of weeks ago, and I think you were all on the floor when the majority leader read the resolution recognizing Bell Helicopter and calling on Congress to move forward with initiatives to advance the future vertical lift. We're very excited to have Bell Helicopter come to Wichita, Kansas. They've brought they've come to Wichita, they've hired 50 engineers, plan to hire another 100 engineers by the end of summer. Again, great jobs, high-paying jobs. We had the opportunity, though, to sit down with the Lieutenant Governor, who's also our Commerce Secretary, and he asked the question, why Wichita? What really attracted you to Wichita? And they said, well, these are engineering jobs, and we've been all over the United States, and there's good engineers out there. But Bell Helicopter said they were most impressed with those engineers here in Kansas and in the Wichita area, one, because of their education, but also because of the type of education that they were getting. They're getting hands-on practical experience where Bell said, we're putting these engineers to work with a lot less required training than we have to do in other parts of the country. That doesn't happen without a program like the one that we're talking about here today. So it's critical that we're able to continue this program, and therefore, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the committee report the bill out favorable for passage. Happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jason. Next, we'll have David Soffer with the Department of Commerce. Welcome, committee, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. David Sofer, Legislative Policy Director, Kansas Department of Commerce. I'll be short and sweet since most of the points are covered. I mean, obviously, engineering is incredibly important to our economy. When you think about bridges, tunnels, and the like, I mean, they're all responsible through engineers. I mean, they contribute a large piece of our economy. It's important to build around them. So when you look at kind of where the focus was with our framework for growth, that economic development blueprint, we focused on making sure we continue to expand the opportunities here for engineers, and it's important also not only to be able to graduate them, keep them in our state as well. If we're investing those taxpayer dollars, it's important that they continue to contribute to the Kansas economy long term. We view it as a partnership with being able to retain. It's not only on the university side, but Commerce has to do a better job with not only being able to market our state, but also being able to provide those opportunities that graduates will see their home here in Kansas. And so that's why we supported the amendment that went through on the House side that has that reporting requirement, because again, we want to be able to work as a partnership and be able to help out our universities. If they aren't being able to retain their graduates at a high enough rate, we want to be able to find out what we can do better to help out with that. So from that end, it's a great bill. It's a great program. It's improved the amount of, it's dramatically increased the amount of graduates we've had here in Kansas over the last 10 years with engineers. We want to be able to see that continue, and we want to be able to continue to see this program and sector grow here in our state. So with that, again, we certainly are big proponents of this bill, and certainly would encourage you to pass it out favorably. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions when the time's right.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll have Blake Flanders with the Kansas Board of Regents on WebEx. Blake, are you there?
Good morning, Chair Bellinger. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we got you. Thank you and welcome to committee.
All right, well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here today and support House Bill 2101. Just very simply, the universities have really outperformed in every area. Almost 1,500 graduates with a requirement of 1365, and getting to that point before the end point of the legislation. As you recall, that required a 1-to-1 match. We've had almost a 3-to-1 match. And I have to tell you, in the number of years I've been proponents for certain bills, I've never seen such an outpouring from our industry partners. Industry partners like NetSmart, Garmin, Hallmark, I'm going to miss some, but Black & Veatch, Cliff Illig, who's was at Cerner, now at Enterprise Kansas City. So just a tremendous industry support. And I'm struck by what the gentleman from Wichita, Jason Watkins, said about primary jobs. These are all primary jobs. In fact, there's a multiplier effect on those jobs for our economy. But if you just do a quick back of the napkin math on sales tax and income tax for the graduates that have stayed in Kansas, it's almost $19 million without any multiplier at all. And so just a tremendous return on investment for the state of Kansas. And I'd stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll have Hugh Carter with the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce on WebEx. Hugh, are you there?
I am, Chairman Bellinger. Thank you very much, Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome committee.
Great. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you briefly in support of House Bill 2101 on behalf of the nearly 800 members of the Lawrence Chamber. At this stage in the lineup, I don't have anything new to add, so I'll keep it brief and just say a couple of things that have already been mentioned. But this economic development initiative, as an economic development organization, there's lots of debate always about what constitutes good economic development. One thing, though, that is universally accepted as being, good economic development, perhaps even the Holy Grail, is anything that actually generates high quality, high paying primary jobs. We've touched on it before, but rather than shifting money around the community, this brings new funds in. And so these engineering positions fit the bill for the best of economic development, especially knowing the demand we have with them meeting the goal of and creating 1,365 graduates in 2021 alone. We still have such demand outstripping the supply to where 70% of these private sector employers are looking for engineers. And so given that, the relatively low cost coming from ELAR funds and the matching component, we see this as low hanging fruit when it comes to economic development, and something that we would very much urge you all to support. So thank you very much for your time. Thank
you, Hugh. Committee, Is there anyone else here that was a proponent that wasn't on the list that wanted to testify? Seeing none? Or? Yeah. So, committee, we have written only from Richard B. Myers, K-State University, Douglas Gerard, University of Kansas, and Richard Muma at Wichita State University. We also have Joe Dremel, American Council of Engineering Companies of Kansas, METL, Manhattan Emporia Topeka Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, Kevin Walker, Overland Park Chamber of Commerce, and the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City. Are there any opponents? No opponents. Move on to neutral. We have a neutral testimony from Matt Lindsay with the Kansas Independent College Association. Are you on? He's here. Okay, good. I thought maybe he's on WebEx. Welcome, committee, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Matt Lindsay, the president of the Kansas Independent College Association, and I come before you as a neutral conferee on this bill. We support the idea and the concept behind the University Engineering Initiative. But I note that there are 4 ABET-accredited colleges and universities in the state of Kansas. There's KU, there's K-State, there's Wichita State, and there's Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. Benedictine College offers engineering programs ABET-accredited in mechanical, civil, and chemical engineering, and they're about a year away from having electrical engineering approved as well. These are degrees from Benedictine, not a partner institution. These are courses taught by Benedictine faculty, and 90% of their graduates stay in Kansas. Friends University in Wichita is pursuing ABET accreditation in 2 of those fields, and is probably about, let's call it 18 months away from being able to begin those programs. Under the current law, private colleges in Kansas are not allowed to receive funds and are not supported in this program. You heard a lot about partnership and economic development. I would argue that if this is the point, if the point is economic development and growing engineers for the whole state, then you are leaving an important tool in your toolkit by not including the private colleges. And in fact, by not including us, not only do you cut out the good work being done at Benedictine, the good work being done at Friends, our schools are pursuing engineering programs alternatively because they cannot compete internally to hire the faculty. And so you take a school like Mid-American Nazarene in Olathe, who says we can't compete to hire the faculty and build the facilities when we're not subsidized the same way. So they partnered with Washington University in St. Louis for an engineering program. Students go to Mid-American Nazarene for the first 2.5 years, almost 3 years, transfer to St. Louis and finish their degree there, and those students do not come back. So we are exporting engineers we could probably keep in Kansas by including the private colleges in this initiative. So we highly encourage and support the concept here. We want to be a contributor to the improvement of the state. We think we can contribute. We're not as big as KU and K-State and Wichita State. That is true. But to not include us at all is, I think, a failure and undercuts the effectiveness of this very good program. So we would hope you would consider amending the program, including ABET-accredited nonprofit colleges in this effort, and I'd be happy to stand for questions at the right time.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. We have a little information we'd like to hand out to the committee members. Do we have that? Shirley has it. I didn't know if she'd give it to you or not, so. Shirley has some information. We had asked, about the numbers, how many of these folks stay in Kansas and so forth. So Shirley was able to have a little more information for everyone. And okay, with that, we're going to start with questions, and we'll start with Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the last conferee, I'm not sure. So you have an engineering school at Benedictine, and you have 2 other schools that might like to start them. There'd be no way to tell what your growth is starting except from 0. And I'm assuming if they're starting engineering schools, you have the interest already that people want to be an engineer?
Yes. So the premise, or the underlying premise is no, I couldn't tell you, from 0, what's the forecast. I can tell you Benedictine's experience was that, so they started slow. They partnered originally with the University of North Dakota to make sure they knew what they were doing. when they move to ABET accreditation. They have been doing that now for 3 years and graduating about 20 a year. Their incoming class is now up to going to push them to 35. And the subsequent year, they're already looking at applications that probably push their number of graduates to 40 to 50. That's over so let's say they took almost 9 years to build the program. So they get up to 50. We can use that as a model, but I don't know how an N of 1 can answer the question all that well.
Thank you. I wish we had this earlier. This actually is part of some of my questions, but I'll take a look at it a little bit later. So having carried this bill 10 years ago, I can't believe 10 years has already gone by. I was just looking at the additions in the new bill, and then I was looking at a letter that was sent to Representative Waymaster about how I think they are going to use it. And if I recall, and I was trying to find the bill from 10 years ago, everybody had a specific dynamic way of how they were going to use it. And what I recall, KU was using it because they were just building an engineering school and trying to do a second phase. Wichita State was going to go into the communities, the junior highs, and try to interest children in becoming engineers, so kind of a career-driven. And it looks like the bill we have in front of us, I don't see, it doesn't really point out exactly our priorities unless Section 3 is open-ended in allowing them to do whatever through the Board of Regents. So Shirley, can you answer the question about how they were using it and that we're no longer going to use those guidelines, and what the discussion was in bringing it when we brought the new bill? So they had guidelines of how we were using it 10 years ago, each engineering school.
Shirley, if you want to come to the mic, please.
I apologize. I was in the process of sending you the statutes. They can use it for construction and equipment for the labs, for the engineering, and to increase the number of students. There is, and I was just trying to look at what I sent you out, they do have bonding, KU, K-State, and Wichita, that they're in the process of using some of the engineering initiative funds to pay the bonds on the buildings that they have built.
Okay. Well, so is there a reason we're using 2017 regular session to conduct the review? I'm just looking at the bill on page 2. I'm just trying to understand that last paragraph on line 42. On or before the day of the 2017 regular.
David Weiss can probably, I think
Okay.
he's.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can address that.
Thank you.
David, please go ahead.
Yeah, that language there in C, that is actually current law. That's the current statute. It shows up in bold just because that statute was brought in by the House Committee to make the changes on page 3
Okay.
and section D. So yeah, it looks a little weird because it shows bold, but it's actually current law. So that report, that review had already taken place.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And in the last bill, I guess that's why we have this data. They did track their growth. Okay. All right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGinn. Other questions? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really pleased with the growth that we've been able to get in terms of graduates. I had a question from Mr. Roberts' testimony and maybe Mr. Carter's, who Mr. Roberts mentioned there's a need for more engineers in Kansas in private sector. He also said government sector. And then Mr. Carter mentioned that 70% of the firms he knew about were still private firms. How are we doing on the government sector jobs? And just curious, I'll start with Mr. Roberts. Is that need similar to, in terms of numbers that we need in government sector? Has it helped that we're now funding KDOT and the IKE program and some of those things, or where is that government sector need largely?
Thank you, Senator Hawk. The government need, I can't tell you exactly where it's at. I know that from talking with a couple of the directors of the Turnpike and others that some of that funding has certainly been helpful, but I'd have to defer to them to let them tell you exactly where it's at. I do know from personal experience, working career fairs and those kinds of things, that the primary focus for employees was through the industry sector. I think what was it, 72% need that. And that leads, that employment of those, sometimes those employees decide they'd rather work in the government sector. So if you grow the private sector, it also helps grow the government sector in terms of what they're trying to do locally in small communities for city engineers, those kinds of things, as well as more globally in the state with the Turnpike Authority and the Department of Transportation and that type of thing.
Is there a major wage or salary discrepancy between private and government sector wages?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm not surprised. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If anyone else wants to respond to my question. But.
Seeing none. Senator Fagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was kind of along Senator Hawk's idea here, but can Mr. Roberts have made the comment, how many engineers are we still short in Kansas? You know, they said at a meeting, said we're still short. Is there any kind of numbers that was thrown out there?
Senator, I'm reluctant to give you an exact number, but no, I can't give you an exact number.
Okay.
I think from the survey that was taken, there may be able to collect those numbers, but I don't know those exact numbers, so I'm hesitant to say anything.
How many members belong to the Kansas Society of Professional Engineers?
We have north of 500 members.
Okay.
We also partner with one of the other groups that was here, the ACEC component. We have a strong partnership with them also.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be for Shirley.
Shirley.
I understand, Shirley, that the goal is to keep those attract and keep engineering students and engineers here in Kansas. When I'm looking on page 4 of the handout you gave us on the median engineer salaries with cost of living adjustments, if I'm reading this right, Colorado, Missouri, and Texas are the other states we most frequently compete for those students and engineers with. And if I'm looking at this right, we have the second highest cost of living index. Is that accurate?
Ma'am, I can only state what the information I was given by the Board of Regents.
It looks like that's true, and it looks like our salaries due to that, other than aerospace engineers, we beat Colorado. Every other category, we're losing to the other 3 states. And so this would be my question to anybody else. Maybe we get them and we keep them through this program for a few years, but after that, how are we going to keep them if our cost of living is well below the other states that we're competing with? So if someone would like to address that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there anyone like to try to answer that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, we we developed that information, but that cost of living just came out of I think through the census or was just statistics. I wouldn't be able to respond to, how we might keep them as a result of that. I think there's been a little bit of a thought that we have cheaper housing in Kansas, and therefore our salaries can be somewhat lower and still attract people here to the state. And just as our team looked at total cost of living, we want to be sure that our salaries are aggressive if we're going to keep these graduates. I would tell you that anytime you have high-skilled graduates, they're in demand, and it's very competitive for the graduates.
Senator Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not to date myself, but I have two children who, graduated college not that long ago. And as much as I try to educate them on cost of living being cheaper here, they see that salary number, and boy, that's tempting when you're a young college graduate to just go after that big number. So I don't know what can be done. I just think that may be something we need to take a good look at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm really having a hard time understanding Table 3. And maybe they addressed this and I just didn't hear or listen. Why our average wages are going down? Am I reading this wrong?
Shirley, would you mind coming to the mic, please?
Or Blake? Did Blake produce this?
Blake? Okay. Are you still there, Blake?
I am. I'm at a bit of disadvantage. I don't have that right in front of me, but we just essentially pull the wage data.
How do we go? I think about inflation. I get that we had, a little recession early on. I guess the way I'm reading this, if you graduated in 2012, you got 92,000. If you graduated in 2019, you got 56,000. I think something's wrong.
So you would be more experienced. So if you graduated in 2012 and spent that number of years in the workforce, if we pull your wages and you have 8 or 9 years of experience, your
Okay, I
wages
get
are
it now.
higher than a new graduate.
It's what they're currently making. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that Senator McGinn for addressing this issue on Table 3. But I did want to add onto what Senator McGinn asked earlier. I think also one thing that's occurred in the last 10 years when it comes to what the engineering industry has been doing along with education is in helping with STEM education. STEM education has exploded in the last 10 years. So I think that definitely is a area that works into attracting boys and girls into the area of engineering.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look at Table 1 and you look at 2019, and they talk about graduates who initially stayed in Kansas were 42%. That one kind of grasps me. We're talking about we have a real need there, and less than half these people staying in the state. Sorry. Do I need to say that again? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you look at Table 1 on page 2, 2019, it says graduates who initially stayed in Kansas at 42.9%. And so we're sitting here taking this money saying, we've got these people, we need this, it's a great program, but less than half of it's staying in the state of Kansas. I wonder if anybody would like to respond to that.
Tom?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question, and Senator, that's been discussed a lot. Let me explain my personal situation. I graduated from Kansas State University and went into the military for 2 years. So I left the state, and that's hard to control when you have graduates doing that kind of thing, some type of service. When I came back, I worked in Kansas City, Missouri for a little company called Black & Veatch, just over the state line, but I lived in the state of Kansas. So if you look at that chart, I would be in there as the part of the 12% that moved to Missouri, or was working in Missouri, but I was actually living in Kansas. And I know there are a number of folks at Burns & McDonnell, Black & Veatch, HNTB, other large companies like that, where they're close to the state line, and they have people living on both sides. So we've been encouraging the coupling of that, at least in the greater Kansas City area, because it tends to distort, I'll call it distorting the data just a little bit. I think there's one other thing I'd like to also note. We do have engineers that move to large companies outside the state. And there's one particular engineer that moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, was highly successful with a major railroad company. And if you come back to our campus, you can see that contribution back to our university, both in athletics as well as to the names of the College of Engineering. And so I think it's important that we not look past the fact that we get a lot of alumni support back, even though they may not be living in the state of Kansas, and that's worth a lot. That's where a lot of that matching fund came from, to meet the matching funds from the state. We did very, very well there, getting alumni giving.
Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of getting the best return on investment for the Kansas taxpayer and the revenue stream that we are providing, I have a question for some of the conferees or anyone. How about if we inject a little bit of a competitive nature into this process and include some more additional education schools that do produce engineers, and that we award this based on the graduation rate, the number of graduates and so forth, as opposed to fronting the money up front. I think all three of the Regent schools have adequate facilities, buildings, they have adequate equipment, they probably have great teachers, instructors, and professors. But to include the private colleges as well and give them an opportunity to compete, I think we ought to, after this 10-year period, look at that a little bit and say, okay, how can we make a better return on investment? How can we have a competitive environment between our universities and the other private schools and really generate the best number, the highest number of graduates in engineering programs, and we award based on the results and not the front-end loaded process. So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Blake, would you like to address that from Board of Regents?
Yes, I can. And I've always liked programs that have been competitive, because I do think it brings out high performance. In this case, as I look at this program, and I was associated with the board at the time that this was passed, so I too would share Senator McGinn's sentiment. I can't believe it's been this long since we've had this passed. But in this case, I'm not sure that the competition for graduates is necessary, and here's why. If institutions were not performing or barely meeting the standard, I would say that extra competition will help our performance. Institutions have produced almost 1,500 graduates, I think just a couple short of 1,500. So institutions without that competitive piece have far overperformed what the requirements of the legislature were. Here's what we've learned over the last few years. When this was initially passed, the legislature, and those that were here will remember this, the legislature said, institutions, you have a role, and your mission is to produce the graduates. They went to the Department of Commerce and said, you have a role, Department of Commerce. Your mission is to connect these engineers to the state of Kansas employers and ensure that they stay in the state. That was initially what the contract was, if you will. Here's what we've learned. We need to both be in this together in terms of connecting the engineers to the state. It shouldn't be just the Department of Commerce's responsibility. We at the board have asked our institutions to take a more active role in economic prosperity and connecting these engineers to the state. So I think some of the things you've seen, I can give one example at the Wichita State University campus where they had employers right there on the campus where these students can easily transition into those jobs. I think that's going to be the real growth that happens in Engineering Initiative 2.0, is that we're going to have universities working hand in glove with the Department of Commerce to improve those numbers that stay in Kansas.
Again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit tied to what Blake just shared, but the one that's been catching my attention is Table 2 that shows that engineering graduates are slowly leaving as they gain experience. We heard from one of the conferees, some may be going to larger institutions. I was curious, is there any effort or can there be an incentive to get the businesses to have them, I can't remember what you call when you leave a job, there's a term, but fill out something simple enough to just know, is it the larger firms, is it money, is it family, is it the amenities of our community? And I think of Oklahoma City, who worked very hard to get American Airlines years ago, gave them all kinds of money and they didn't come, and they asked why. And they said, we don't like your K-12 public schools. And that's why American Airlines did not locate there. So I'd just be curious if we could really hone in on, is it a larger engineering firm? Is it money and what? And I don't know if any of the conferees could comment on that at all. Or maybe chamber people, community folks, if they've looked into that, because that always concerns me when we educate and groom folks for jobs in our area and they leave. And my question is why?
Does anyone wish to comment on that from the conferees?
Let me just take Mr. Sofer for an example here, since he's sitting there looking at me. That'd be something I think that maybe your department would be looking at from time to time.
Yeah, so I think that's why we had asked for the amendment that got put in on the House side. I think we need to be able to look at the data on an annual basis. Currently, there hasn't been much review, at least from our end, on the data, and that's why we think, as Blake had mentioned, this is a partnership, and so we've got to be able to see why folks are leaving, you know, how long have they been leaving, kind of where the trends are headed, and trying to figure out where the gap exists and figuring out how to meet that gap. It's not going to be able to happen just by Board of Regents. It's not going to be able to happen just by the Department of Commerce. There is a partnership in this. It's teamwork and figuring out exactly why. So that kind of ties in also to Senator Fagg's comment on kind of, you know, seeing that big number of graduates heading out. We really need to see the data and try to hone in on exactly why it's happening. I'm not sure any of us have one clear-cut reason why, and that's why we need more data to be able to get that, and that's why we put that as part of the bill, to be able to look at this on an annual basis and have this conversation annually, because we do think it's important.
Thank you.
I have a question for Blake, if you're still there.
I am.
Blake, changing course just a little bit here. Can you give the committee a little information on how these funds are primarily used, and are we doing any scholarships with these funds?
Yeah, so right now at the University of Kansas, the funds are mainly used for facilities. at Kansas State University, they also did a bond and hired some graduate teaching assistants as well. I think that if you look at mostly the scholarships, I think that has typically been with the matching dollars. Wichita State created and supported an engineering student success center. They've funded quite a few graduate teaching assistants that are very helpful in the program, and also did some recruitment of faculty. That was also at the other universities. We've added 20 faculty at Kansas State, about 24 faculty at the University of Kansas. So in order to expand, we had to increase the number of faculty and improve our facilities. I think in terms of the scholarships, those matching dollars and the dollars that were talked about by Comfrey Tom Roberts, was many of the contributions that were received from alumni.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, I guess we've got all the questions answered. So with that, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2101. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you folks on WebEx. Appreciate all the information. Committee, I think we have enough time here. We want to work on a few bills that we previously heard. First bill I would like to work is House Bill 2214. Are there any questions on that bill? Is Jill on WebEx? I think that was one Jill did for us.
Yes, sir. I'd be pleased to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jill. Are there questions on this bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn.
I followed this on WebEx yesterday, and I believe it passed unanimously in the House, and it's just a cleanup on some property that has been on the books for over 100 years, it sounded like. So I would make a motion to approve House Bill 2214. And I'm not sure if the House had it on the calendar, but I mean, it's up to the committee whether you want to put it on the calendar or not. So I see a thumbs up, and be placed on the calendar.
We have a motion. We have a second by Senator Clays. Any other discussion or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Let's pull House Bill 2218 out of your folders, please, and we'll work that one. And let me see if I can figure out who the reviser was on this one. Yes.
If we have a reviser, otherwise I can explain this bill.
Okay, Senator McGinn.
Quite simply. What this bill does is we have a Employees Health Care Commission, and it's a pool of representatives of the employees that use the state health plan. And what's happened over the years, and in the Department of Administration, it's primary, the problem is in that area. If you were under the Department of Administration, under a previous administration, there was a lot of incentives to go to unclassified. And so they are now about 50-50. and they would like to be able to include the unclassified individuals as being eligible to be on this healthcare commission. So it's really just opening up that pool selection for them because of the changes in our proportions of classified versus unclassified.
Any questions on this bill? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to move House Bill 2218 favorably for passage.
A motion is second by Senator Clays. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The last one I'd like to work today is Senate Bill 154.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator McGinn.
This has to do with the increases in the IDD waiver, and I have an amendment that I would like to hand out.
Please do so.
And Scott, I hope you're on. Please help me out if I get this wrong. I just want to make sure the amendment lines up with the intentions.
Are you there, Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
What this amendment does is it lines up the bill with the budget. And in our budget, what we did, we passed a 5% increase for 2021. And then we passed, again, another 5% increase for 2022, plus an additional 2%. And this will put that in statute. If you do the math, I looked at some of the testimony we had last week, we gave them a raise about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was 3% one year and 2% another year. And the concern was it still isn't enough, and it certainly wasn't. But if they get the 5% plus the 2%, it will get them up to the national average. And this basically what it does is it does put what we approved in the budget, or we hope will be approved in the budget, and puts it in statute. And then it does take out the CPI. I did some research on the CPI. Generally, the CPI has been used in regarding county appropriations based on property tax, retirement annuities in determining a final average salary, and long care facilities on trying to figure out that personal needs fund. We have never used it for salaries. And my concern is that if we did do this, that we would have quite a few people in here next year to do that as well for them. And so that's what this amendment does, unless Scott tells me otherwise. It lines everything up with our budget.
Thank you. Are we good, Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Senator Clays.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, I would move that we pass Senate Bill 154 as amended out of committee favorably for passage.
Okay, so we're adding the amendment and passing it out in the same time. Okay, so seconded by Senator Clays. Are there questions on?
Unless you want to
Should
go
we
back
do the amendment first?
Let's do the amendment first.
Okay.
Senator Clays is making me nervous. I feel like I have to hurry up when he puts his little fingers. All right, well, let's just break it down. I will move my amendment for Senate Bill 154.
And it's seconded by Senator Clays. All in favor? Or comment first. Okay, Senator Hawk.
No, as much as I want to make sure that we have adequate wages and salaries in our IDD agencies, I was troubled by the CPI as just a precedent-setting thing. So I appreciate Senator McGinn doing that. So thank you for letting me make my comment.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do as well. I think this aligns with the work that our subcommittee did in this area.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment's adopted. Senator McGinn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move out Senate Bill 154 as amended favorably for passage.
Second by Senator Clays. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Committee, with that, we've completed our work for today, and we will have some hearings again tomorrow. So thank you all. Appreciate it.